there, I'm Kim from sunny Arizona.
And I'm Kara from vibrant Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to our channel, the Kara and Kim Live Podcast.
We're both seasoned realtors with a passion for all things real estate. From market trends to insider tips, we're here to guide you through the journey of buying and selling homes.
But that's not all. We'll also take you on a journey getting to know various small business owners.
Whether you're a first-time home buyer, need more space for your growing family, or just curious about the market in Phoenix, Arizona,
or a seasoned investor, or you're looking for insights about the Metro Atlanta area, we've got you covered.
Our podcast is designed to be informative, engaging, and a bit fun too.
We love interacting with our listeners, so don't hesitate to reach out with your questions or topics that you'd like us to explore.
Subscribe to our channel and join us on this exciting journey. New episodes will be coming your way regularly, filled with fresh content and expert advice.
So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's do a deep dive into the world of real estate together. Welcome to the Kara and Kim Podcast. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your career as an author.
Sure. Well, first off, it's great to be here. Hopefully everyone's having a good day, a good weekend. My name is Andrew Snorton. I'm technically originally from Bloomington, Illinois, but grew up in the state of New Jersey for elementary, middle, and high school. Collegiately attended Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I've been in the Metro Atlanta area since about the late 90s. Of the many hats that I wear today, I'm really excited to talk about wearing the hat as a published author. It really officially started in February of 2017, but a lot of the background writing that I used to do for one of the online magazines, Examiner, started from March of 2010 through the summer of 2016 when they shut down. And I knew I wanted to continue writing, and I know writing an article is different than writing a book because you have to be able to stretch your writing. So during the summer 2016, I talked with two individuals in particular, Tyra Satai, who is tied in with Arts and Entertainment. She's done work with some great artists like Dougie Fresh, Force MDs, everybody and whatever. So shouts to Ty, and also shouts to Darius Gordian Jr. Those are two people who had published books, gave me some insight and really helped me in regards to stretching my writing. So true story is that my first book was supposed to be a collection of political essays. As people can recall, 2016 was a very interesting election cycle, and I had these brilliant ideas. But what happened is like October of 2016, my laptop crashed and I wasn't smart enough to put it on flash drive or in the cloud. So please back your stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. So when I realized that was one of the things I couldn't recover, I'll admit I went into my vocabulary bag of 3 and 4 letter words, a few 5-letter words. And then after about 10, 15 minutes of using that vocabulary, it kind of dawned on me. The second book I wanted to do is going to be a poetry book. And so then it was like, you know what, maybe that first book wasn't supposed to be my first book. So I was able to turn that negative into a positive, or turning lemons into lemonade. And the backstory on the very first book, Deeper Than Your Deepest Sleep, Thoughts on Love with Joseph Snorton, is the title came from, of all things, around the time when Dr. Maya Angelou passed. As many people remember, Dr. Maya Angelou, extraordinary social activist, author, writer, did everything under the sun. She just has every part of her story is so compelling. She was on faculty at Wake Forest University for about 30 years. And I was able,
I didn't know it was so long.
Well, as a side note, the Reynolds Professor, which is basically a lifetime achievement, like if you get that, you're basically there until you transition. That was created for her, because she actually was a commencement speaker at Wake, and they wanted her to be on faculty, and they created the Reynolds Professor position in order to get her. 30 plus years later, that's how that happened. But fast forwarding, when she transitioned, I was fortunate to be one of the people to be able to go. But when I got my invite in through email, it was the name of Joseph instead of Andrew. Now, I'm not the smartest person in here, but like Andrew to Adam, Andrew to Alex, okay, but Andrew to Joseph, that's like half a different alphabet. And me being the youngest in the family and probably the most sarcastic, I asked my mom and dad, there's something you need to tell me. And mom looked at me cross-eyed, and my dad almost like threw something at me like, you have lost your mind. But doing research, there's a distant family member named Joseph. So the book is basically a poetic retelling on us talking about the energy of love. I think oftentimes men, we don't talk about that. And when we do, we want to go deep, but for some reason, either we put things in our way or we allow other things to get in our way in talking about it. So the book is basically a poetic retelling of that conversation.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off and ask a question.
Yes.
You said something that struck me. Men not knowing how to, or feeling the space pretty much to talk about love. Can you explain to us a little bit how you were even able to share?
Yeah, it's good because like when we were just talking, it just happened to go that direction. I think part of it might have been like different things that were going on personally at that time, transitioning out of a relationship and trying to make sure to make sense out of things, that just because you're not experiencing something in one realm, it doesn't mean you're not experiencing it in something else. And unfortunately, I think back to that time, like in 2015, 2016, especially during the holidays where sometimes it's a negative spike for people. And there was a case up in Chicago where an engagement was broken off and the man went to where the woman's place of work and shot and killed her and then shot and killed himself. And I'm like, you have every right to feel angry, hurt, or disappointed, but that doesn't give you the right to act on it in that manner. And part of the conversation with Joseph, when we're looking at love through the lens of family relationships, community relationships, people in your life, people out of your life, like if you're not experiencing love through one realm, it doesn't mean you're not able to experience it through others. And by the same token, even like a couple of the chapters do talk about breakup and what have you. And so you have every right as a person to experience the full range of emotion. But just because you're going through that hurt, it doesn't mean, okay, I feel hurt, I'm going to beat up somebody today. Or I feel hurt, I'm going to blow up a city block. Or I feel hurt, I'm going to go to somebody's place of business and just do some foolish stuff. So in finding that space, and we've heard safe spaces, but in finding a space to be able to be open, articulate your feelings, and the way we did this book of poetry is the beginning of each chapter is a portion of the conversation. That way the reader knows the context. So when they read the poem, it makes a lot more sense. I know sometimes with poetry, people get on this creative tangent, but they forget to bring the reader with them. So by doing that, by having it as like the preview of this is what we're going to get into, and now you're reading the poem, it's like, aha, I can draw connections. Or as some people said, this articulates what I felt about the relationship with my mom, or relationship with my dad, or when I went through a breakup, or when I'm doing self-reflection of looking at the small picture, big picture. So I think it's just a good way to be like, find that safe space where you can decompress, experience the wide range of emotion. You have every right to feel some kind of way, but you have a bigger right to see if this is where I am, where am I trying to go, and how can I do it constructively versus destructively. So, and like I'll tell anybody, it's not only just a reminder for the audience, it's a reminder for myself.
You said a mouthful. Okay. So in your going through this first book, have you found have you created any like community with other men talking about their emotions?
That's a good question. I think anytime like doing a book reading or book signing, and when men ask the question, I think one of the biggest questions is, how comfortable did you feel being open and vulnerable in talking about not only like quote other men's experiences, but you sprinkle in a little bit of yours. And here's how I look at it. Like, yeah, it's true, everything isn't for public consumption, but by the same token, at times, if you allow yourself to be open, there's other people that realize, hey, I'm not the only one who's experienced this positive or experienced this negative. And I think it's one of those where you feel like you're not the only person thematically going through something. I think that's the biggest thing, because sometimes, like when things are going well, sometimes you keep it to yourself because people around you aren't going through stuff, and you don't want to come across as I'm bragging or boasting, versus like I'm genuinely excited, like this is happening. Mm-hmm. And by the same token, when things aren't going great and you're around people who are presenting themselves, everything's going fine, you're like, I don't want to talk about this. And now it's almost like the whole water pipe. And at some point, you can only handle so much pressure before you burst. So if anything, whether it's for me or other people, especially when you're looking at some of the things that don't always go according to plan, you'd rather talk about it and get it out of your system and realize those might be examples some of the time, but it's not always reflective of the majority or all. If anything, hopefully it prevents some of us, especially when we look at some of the quote, negative outcomes or outcomes that don't go your way, instead of lumping an entire category of people, oh, all such and such are the same. No, all such and such aren't the same because you haven't met all and you haven't met the majority. You can say some are like, and that's legit. Some are, but I can't say that for the majority or all, because if the majority or all were a certain way, then why are the majority of all of a certain segment the people who are supportive of me when I do a book signing or supportive of me when I'm doing another project? I'll just be totally transparent. As men, we gotta be real careful about what we say about women. I'm just gonna be that blunt. And I'm gonna say that because it's true. There are some women who just things just went left. Seriously, let's just be honest. But you can't say because that's happened to you some of the time that the majority or all are like that. I haven't met the majority or all of women, but I do know this. When I do a book signing, I know who comes out, and I thank each and every one of you. So for me to make a broad sweeping statement just because things didn't go according to plan or things went left or things went right is foolish. And if anything, and that goes both ways. So I think, again, in writing this, and yet a men's perspective, but their universalities, I think, as long as people realize you do have the potential for positive takeaways, even if some things are not going according to plan, it doesn't mean you're less than or you're a failure or anything. Take inventory of what is going well and feed off of that. And then just keep everything else in perspective where it's some versus majority or all, because you haven't met the majority or all.
How many works have you published currently?
Oh, 4. So let's go.
Okay,
Let's
yep.
go ahead and rip through them. So the second one, 9 Stories of Faith. All my books are my favorite, but this is probably my favorite one because this is entirely interview based, where, quote, all of us are dealing with something, but some people are dealing with something each and every day. So the people I interviewed opened up about living with challenges like physical health, mental health, life after incarceration, life after a family member passes. And they were open in sharing not only through the lens of their respective faiths. So I was able to interview across the faith community, Christianity, Hinduism, and Islam, but what they're doing through the lens of faith, what they're doing, best practices in health and wellness, how they utilize their support network, and how they've changed their way of thinking. They still have positive and powerful lives. So like I tell people, it doesn't mean you have to do everything exactly the way that the people in this book did, but it lets you know that there are options and pursue those options. And another thing that I like about this is having a better conversation across the faith community. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of misconceptions about our peers of non-Christian faith. Part of where I address that is in the intro, where you think about the traditional Islamic greeting, wassalamu alaikum, alaikum assalam. What does that mean? Peace unto you and peace back. Yeah. So when you think about the church, when they talk about expressions of friendship or fellowship, even that parallel greeting is where I'm acknowledging you as a person, your humanity. So maybe if we have more of those types of conversations and see where there's areas of overlap within the faith community, then when you look at some of these bigger community issues, social issues, now all of a sudden you do a better job of building coalitions because there are some universalities across Christianity or Absolutely. Hinduism or people of Jewish background, people of Islamic background. So if we actually just pause and talk with and listen to and realize where we do have those areas of overlap and let's start there, now all of a sudden those boundaries expand. Yeah. So, and
there's even, some similarities in the spiritual community. Oh, yeah. You're just people who don't really have a faith it's strictly defined, if you will.
Yeah, and it's not just through faith, because people open up about what are best and better practices, let's say physical health or mental health, understand how important it is to have your circle, whether it's your immediate family, extended family, friends, people that will call and check on you, or, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee. Yeah. Those types of things, whether it's formal or informal, still help. And then just be aware of what you're putting in between your left and the right ear, and be aware of what you're putting out verbally, written, because all those little things, they do play a factor. So again, with 9 stories, like I said, all of us are dealing with something. Some people are doing something each and every day. And you don't have to do things exactly the way the people in here talk about, but it lets you know, hey, you know what? I never thought about maybe changing the way I move, or maybe let me ask these types of questions of my doctor, or maybe let me identify, nonprofit support or faith-based support, or, identify those family members or friends or what have you who genuinely call, hey, I just asked to see how you're doing, those types of things. Going into the third book, Nothing Minor, this focuses on my love for baseball growing up as a kid, but it's really focused on my very first year of covering minor league ball. So 2019, was able to cover minor league baseball in states of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And the book really extended for me doing my coverage. And really, this book almost never got written. The seed that was planted, of all things, was the fall of 2019, September of 2019. I go back to Jersey for my high school reunion. And at first I wasn't going to go. My parents like, just go and see what happens. So I'm like, all right, I'll just show for like an hour and a half. So 3.5 hours later. But one of the
you guys can't tell, once Andrew gets to talking.
I know, I'm like butter. I'm on a roll before I forget. It's the salt and pepper in me. But no, I'm sitting here talking, and one of my classmates was like, when is your book coming out? And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? Your book on baseball. What are you talking about? And I'm like, wait, you read the articles? They're like, yeah, when's your book coming out? I'm like, that's how the book got started. And
that's funny because I just assumed that's why you were covering.
I was covering the sport just because of part of the press and media access. And I wasn't covering with the intention of writing a book. I was covering to cover it.
And all of us who know you were just like, okay, that's the next thing.
Yeah, I didn't know it until y'all knew something before I did. But what ended up happening, I was very intentional as best as possible with the interviews I did, interviews of African-American players, because we know on the major league level, it's less than 10% of all players. We know like the 70s and 80s is when everything transitioned. Mm-hmm. So the good thing is some of the players I interviewed are from Metro Atlanta. Some of them are on major league rosters. Probably the most significant names that come up are Tyler Stevenson, who is the starting catcher for the Cincinnati Reds, Tristan Casas, who was a candidate for Rookie of the Year this year, 2023. He plays with the Boston Red Sox. I'm a Yankees fan, but I'll make an exception there with Tristan. But he was a candidate for Rookie of the Year. Tuki Toussaint, who Braves fans remember was in the Braves system. He's now with the Chicago White Sox, and a few others. So in addition to the game recaps and the player perspectives, which at the time, some of these guys were like 18, 19, and 20. And, I'll just say this, wisdom doesn't always come from age. Because some of these cats were dropping stuff that like 40, 50, 60-year-olds need to take note of. But in addition to the game recaps, the player interviews, there's a special section on the Negro Southern League Museum located in Birmingham, Alabama, as it actually has a larger set of archives than the Negro League Museum in Kansas City. Okay. And then another small world story is there's another special section with an interview I had with one of the umpire supervisors who basically does the training of minor league and eventually major league umpires. Found out we were both from Bloomington, Illinois. He's actually based in Denver, Colorado, but we found out not only from the same area, but when his parents were living, his parents and my parents went to the same church. So it's a good way.
Small world.
Yeah. So to me, Nothing Minor, whether you're a hardcore fan or you're just someone who just wants to learn more, it really is an accessible read and definitely a sports favorite.
Okay, one question about this before we move on. So I noticed this is a hardcover book and the others are not. So I'm curious, what was the decision in that?
I just wanted to do something different. To be honest with you, it wasn't like I felt with something sports related to do it a little bit differently than how I did the other ones. And I think now, I'll say to a degree collector's item when you realize like half to 2/3, about half the players I interviewed either have seen major league time or are on major league rosters or like are getting recognized as Rookie of the Year candidates and all that. It makes it more of a collectible than anything.
So for some of the non-baseball fans and who will be watching this, explain the difference between the majors and the minors, and then how do you move up?
Okay, so in Major League Baseball, consider that the top of the food chain. Mm-hmm. That's the highest level of baseball that's played. In the minor leagues, working from the bottom is either rookie ball or instructional ball. Then once you hit those benchmarks and get promoted, you're an A ball. Once you hit those benchmarks and get promoted, it's double A. And then once you hit those benchmarks and get promoted, it's triple A. So the teams I covered were either A ball, double A, or triple A. Sometimes there's an exception. People on the double A level may get promoted. And in recent history, Braves fans, if you think about Michael Harris, who won Rookie of the Year in 2022, he was at the double A level. He got promoted to Major League Ball. So every once in a while, you might skip a level. But in general, once you hit your benchmarks, you move up a level. And things along those lines. So even locally in Metro Atlanta, like I'll tell people, a hidden jewel is going to see the Gwinnett Stripers, who are the AAA team. So they're one level below Major League Ball. And the reason why I say that is some of, even like on the press and media end with covering the team, like almost all the players I interviewed saw Major League time. And when a Major League Baseball player is injured and they go on their rehab assignments, most time they're AAA. So for Braves fans, if you think of Max Fried, I actually covered a game of his when he was doing his rehab, and he's one of the Braves' top starters. Ronald Acuna, when he was coming off of his knee surgery, guess where he did his rehab? AAA. Vaughn Grissom, who has been back and forth between AAA and the Braves team, I've interviewed him. Justice Sheffield, who's seen Major League time. So there's a number. So I would say this, obviously, if you get a chance to go to a Major League game or a Braves game, that's a great experience. But price point wise, don't sleep on your minor league ball. A lot of times those players are a lot more accessible. And especially if you're trying to see a major leaguer, I would say go to a AAA game. Like I said, if they're doing their rehab, they're usually sending them to AAA because that's the closest level to Major League Ball. So it gets their timing and all that type of stuff.
All right.
So the fourth book, Quotes and Notes, Something's on the Horizon. Apparently I have a lot to say. That's because I have a lot to share. But honestly, the motivation behind Quotes and Notes was influenced from a book called As a Man Thinketh. And the power of what you put in your head eventually is going to come out in some way, shape, or form was something real important. And for me, you say random stuff or you come up with your own little saying. I'm like, well, why don't I just do the following? Here's the quote, but it's bigger than this deep think piece and explaining the logic and why it's so brilliant. I think what's more brilliant is the space that people have to journal, whether they agree, whether they disagree, whether they're like, you know what, I want to go deeper than what you've done, or it's like, you know what, I want to pause and pivot and go a different direction. So all the quotes, with the exception of one, are original quotes that I've come up with, things that have helped me, and then just some random stuff that apparently has helped other people. But all of us, to varying degrees, like our elders say, you need to go sit down somewhere and just slow down the moving parts. And I think for all of us, myself included, when you slow down the moving parts, it gives you an opportunity to see things for what they are. And now you can be more deliberate or more strategic or more intentional with where you move, how you move, and things along those lines. And, you never know what part of yourself you can connect or reconnect with. Some people are like, oh, I'm too old to do such and such. And maybe not. It might not be too late if you're someone who wants to paint. You can paint at any time. Or I want to play golf. You can play golf at almost any time. Or I want to do my hair a certain way. Or I want to learn how to cook something. I mean, I think a lot of times we look at where we are and we feel like we can't do something or it's too late. Now, some things I'll say, your recovery time may be a little bit different, but I'll put it to you like this. I think a good example of how it might not be too late. You think about like Morgan Freeman, who didn't get into acting until his late there, or even the author,
J.K. Rowling?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Her books have been out for like 10 years before it caught the right person's eye and attention. So part of it is just pause, slow down, revisit, reboot, recreate, and you never know where it can take you. So hopefully with any of the books that I've done, it's not only speaking with an audience, but to a degree, it's a reminder of myself, hey, look, there's still more out there just within the lens of writing that I can tap into. So don't limit yourself.
So every author has a unique writing process, right? Can you share some insights into your creative process?
It varies. You're going to laugh. Honestly, like each book has had a story of its own. Like the first book maybe took me like 2 months to write. But then the second book, 9 Stories of Faith, took me almost a year because of collecting the interviews and just trying to get it right. The baseball, I'd already had the content. It was just reorganizing it. And Quotes and Notes are the same deal. And every process is different. Sometimes I'll write from home, or sometimes I'll go to a library. Sometimes I'll go to a coffee house. Sometimes it might be in the morning. Sometimes it might be late at night. So it's kind of random, but I'll just say this, and this is kind of universal for anything that you're trying to accomplish. You have to identify what consistency looks like for you. And the easiest thing I think about is think about whatever a cooking goal or a physical skill goal that you had, working out. And for you, if you went to the gym 4 days a week, for an hour a day, that's where you got the results. So you use that as a baseline. And so whatever you're trying to accomplish, you have to figure out what consistency looks like for you, and being a little bit random. Like, you can get some stuff done, at home, but maybe not entirely at home, or maybe you need to work at different times a day. So it's kind of every book I've written, it's kind of had a life of its own. The first one, majority of the work was done at home, library, in my aunt's house. Second one, the park, as well as I remember Dr. Jory Hall, she was previously University of Georgia, but now she's up at one of the institutions in Chicago. When she was on her research semester, we met a couple times a week at one of the coffee houses. So I'm looking up and she's writing, she's looking up and I'm writing. So the second book was basically me working with someone who was working on a different book project. This one, nothing minor. It was during the pandemic, but you couldn't even go outside your house. So I didn't have anything else to do. I was like sitting at home. And then quotes and notes was kind of random. So I think for me, it's finding what's consistent, but being open to doing things in different spaces to keep the creative energy going.
Okay, so you continuously look for inspiration in the actual physical spaces. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so as an accomplished author, what advice would you give to an aspiring writer who is looking to embark on their own literary journey?
Oh, easy. First thing is get started. And I'll tell anybody, just start off, as corny as it sounds, get one of those 50 or 75-cent composition books, and whatever random stuff pops in your head, just write it down. And you don't have to write like, let me write this thesis or a masterpiece. Just start getting in the habit of writing. And it could be at the end of the day, how was your day? What made your day good? What made your day not so good? Or you're out at the park, you see whatever squirrels running around, birds chirping around. Just talk about how it made you feel. And part of it is helping you develop and find your voice. We know for some people, public speaking, they get bent out of shape. But get started and just get in the habit of writing. And what's going to happen is, as you're journaling about your day or what you saw on television or your wildest dreams or imaginations, there's going to be a topic, like educators say, hook and hold. There's going to be a topic that hooks you. And it's going to be a topic that holds you. It's going to be a topic that keeps you up at night. And that's what's going to drive what you do. But get started, build the habit. When you're building the habit, don't worry about how it comes out. Let it come out. You can always go back and clean it up later. But that's the easiest advice I'd give to anybody. And I would say, when you get to the point of where you develop, get it edited, whatever, I would say make sure as best as possible when you write, you're looking through the lens of you're talking with your audience, but you're also talking with yourself, and striking that balance. So that way, not only are you giving, your audience perspective, but you're giving yourself perspective as well. And just like you want the audience to be open to different things, you be open to different things as well.
So how did you get over any sort of fear? If there was a topic that you felt that was like a hook in the hole, like how do you get over that fear to actually put pen to paper?
Wow. How do I get over that? I'm like,
especially with the more emotional.
I think like with the first one, especially with a couple of chapters, which were really like really pulling up the curtain. I think for me, part of it is knowing other people were going through parallel experiences. Okay. And sometimes you can't always, like, how people vibe with a song because the lyrics or the beat is, that's it. And so it's one of those where you understand you could be the conduit for helping someone find their voice. And here's a good example. You and I can say the exact same thing, but there's going to be people who resonate more towards you, maybe through it's the lens of gender, queer, or the energy or the calm and what have you. And that's okay. And there might be people who resonate with me because of how I'm delivering and, I'm using subjects and predicates and all that type of stuff. But ultimately, it's you come at peace with using your voice, and it's like, short version, let me just use my voice because there's someone it's going to connect with, but it will never connect if I don't go out there and use it.
Okay, well, so can you share any details about any projects coming out in 2024?
That's a good question. As an author, you're always working on something. That's a good question. I'm going to say, I know at some point I do want to circle back on 9 stories and do another set of interviews, because when people feel that open with sharing their story, you want to try to capture it as accurately as possible. I still kind of think, so I might do another think piece. There's different ideas from, like I said, a follow-up to 9 stories, follow-up to quotes and notes. On the press and media end, I've been blessed to cover college sports, professional sports, people in government and politics. So I think it's one of those, take a piece of my own advice, writing it out, and then seeing what direction really grabs me. But I know, quote, there's something on the horizon. I don't know what's on the horizon, but it's probably going to come from one of those 3 or 4 areas, whether it's another sports related, another motivation, encouragement, empowerment piece. Like it's going to come from one of those 2.
Okay. Do you see any public speaking in the future?
Well, this to a degree is public speaking. I was speaking to the general public. You know what? I've been blessed at different times to speak at different festivals, different campuses. My thing is this: am I open to speaking? Absolutely. But I also know that in order to speak, I have to be consistent, letting people know who I am, what I'm doing, how what I've written can be a fit, and then go from there. So let's just say, yeah, it'll be something on the horizon. I don't know where, but like they say, you stay ready. I had to be ready for this one today. Y'all see how ready I am. Look at here. When you sit with her, you got to stay ready.
Hey, now.
I'm just saying, you got to stay ready.
All right. So if you could, we're going to include all of your socials and contact information in the show notes. But if you could share your website and how they can get in touch.
Yeah, probably the easiest, and I'm glad for apps. Linktree is a blessing. So the easiest way is Linktree, linktr.ee/author A Snorton. So on Linktree, when you go on that, you'll have access to the newsletter that I put out twice a month, usually the beginning of the month and the middle of the month. All my socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, YouTube, archival work I've done with the Status Network and the Conversation Corner, my Amazon author page, and other stuff. So instead of being like, just go to my Linktree and it houses everything. And then from there, it's easier for people to navigate, and then they can log on, follow to the platforms of their preference.
And then one extra question that just occurred to me. Any advice for people on an entrepreneurial journey?
Oh, gosh.
Loaded question.
I'd say this, be open to learning something new each and every day. I think that's the biggest thing. You're not going to know everything. No matter how long you're in something, you're not going to know everything. But you want to do a balance of identifying those best practices based on that in your research. How do you put your creative spin so you're not doing it like other people? There's a lot of people that can write, but people can't write like you. There's a number of people who can build and create, but they can't do it like you. So show whatever you're doing with your research and all that continuing ed, all that type of stuff. I would say keep learning best practices and be open to putting your creative energy to where you do this differently than somebody else, but your different is good. And I want to continue to have that conversation.
Awesome. All right. So look out for his projects coming out in the future, and we will have all of his contact information in the show notes. So thank you so much, Andrew. We really appreciate it. And that's a wrap.